One's ready. Go!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. Trent here today to talk about a few things that I feel like talking about. This might be a members only. We'll see. We'll see how emotionally invested I get in the subject, which will dictate my language, which will dictate whether or not this is members only. Probably. I don't know. I'm not in charge. Jared's the CEO. He's the man with the plan. I just get on here and talk about whatever I want to talk about. But before we get to that, check out our sponsor for this episode is 18 Alpha Fitness. That is 18afitness.com. When you go over there, use the code, the number 1, and then the word ready. One ready to get yourself your discount. Kevin Edgerton, former 18 Echo enlisted side, former 18 Alpha, one of the officers over there on the Special Forces Green Beret teams. Also spent his entire life doing jiu-jitsu and fitness things and then getting the certs and the education to go along with it. So if you're looking to get into one of the special operations pipelines, or you just want to be more fit, you want to be better at jits, you want to be able to play with your kids when you're older, or run down a field without throwing your back, knees, hips, or whatever out, Kevin's got something for you. He's a fantastic person, and he practices what he preaches. And I can't recommend him highly enough. I've known Kevin for a very long time, and he has never steered me wrong. So there you go, 18afitness.com. Use the code number 1 ready. Get yourself the discount. But more important than the discount, obviously, is letting Kevin know that you came from the One's Ready podcast, that what we're doing is influencing people, right? Which is like the name of the game. So the things I want to talk about today, I am a fan of trying to step back and learn lessons from the things that are going on in the world around me. I'm not saying I'm like wicked smart or anything like that, but it is nice to like kind of look at things, try to big picture them, at least do the thought experiment, and try to learn some life lessons through the things that I'm watching happen right now. And so the biggest obvious thing that is happening in our country right now is President Trump was elected, and then the slew of executive orders that he signed as soon as he got there. And people are like, holy crap, like this dude just got in office. Why is he signing all these things? It seems like he just rolled in there with the mandate. He already had a plan. And if you look at the first time he was the president versus this time, there are a lot of differences. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit, is learning from the situation at hand. Sometimes when we don't have the experience, or we get too close to a problem, we have a hard time formulating a plan, right? Like if you don't have the experience, or you get too close to a problem, or like look at President Trump's first presidency, right? He rolls in there. He's not a product of Washington, D.C. as much as some of the other people. He just hires the same people that have been up there the entire time and I think trusts that they're going to do the things that they say that they're going to do in a little bit of a naive way. And what happened was, I think real quick, he found himself in boiling water, surrounded by people that he wasn't sure what game they were playing. And it was just chaos. The media attention. And I'm not saying that the media doesn't go after all presidents, but you can't objectively look at his first presidency and say it wasn't crazy, especially from the media perspective, and how hard they went after him. And so he jumps in there the first time, like maybe being a first time squadron commander. Maybe you went through school real quick, or you skipped the leadership course and they threw you in there out of nowhere, and you feel a little bit out of your depth. And so like immediately you start looking at issues, right? And you have all these problems and you're trying to solve all these problems. And then you find out at some point that the people that were there before you, that you hired because they were the experts in that area, because they worked there, right? So obviously the people with the best solutions are the ones that have been part of that organization forever. It's a very logical assumption to make, I think. But then things do not go the way that you expect them to go. You do not have the kind of power, whether you're the president or a squadron commander, that you probably think that you have, rolling through there. And especially if you don't have experience, or you walk into a minefield, it can be real easy, I think, to get bogged down in the day-to-day problems and the little issues, and lose sight of what your initial goal was, assuming you had an initial goal that was well fleshed out, that had a roadmap that, we'll talk about flexibility here in a little bit when it comes to your goals, but assuming that your goal was actually attainable and you knew what you were talking about. But if you don't have any experience, it's very difficult, I think, sometimes to do these things. And I think that's what we saw in the first presidency. I think he didn't realize how difficult it was going to be to get some of the things done. A lot of the people that he hired, or that were just part of the organization, right when he walked in there, and you see this a lot. They'll say the right things to your face. Whether you're coming in as a chief of an organization, or a supervisor of any kind, or you're the squadron commander, all the people they're gonna kiss the ring when they meet you on the first day. But you might find that later on down the road, the people that claimed that they're with you on these things, that they care about the meritocracy and all these other things, they probably have their own agendas. This is how people are, right? Everybody has like their own agenda, especially if you have like layers of leadership. That everybody wants to do their own thing, and they have their own goals, and they have their own priorities, and they don't line up. We're all going to be a little bit different, and if you don't establish that culture really early on and make sure you have the right people around you, it gets out of control real quick. And if you've ever been part of a company or a squadron or anywhere where there's been chaos, you've seen these things play out. But so what had happened was, so with the President Trump thing, right? So like he loses the election in 2020, and everybody's like, oh man, like he's never coming back, right? But I think what it did was it allowed him to have some space between himself and the problem. And another thing that happened is, if you're in one of these situations where it feels like you're in boiling water, man, step out of the kitchen for a minute and pay attention to what happens when you're not around. These people with the agendas, the people that are working these problems, the problems themselves, you will get an amazing amount of clarity if you create some distance and see the problems in the context of the larger organization and the goals that you have for the organization, and where the solutions are actually going to be, like where you're trying to go, right? Instead of getting really down close to the problems and trying to solve those problems, being able to step back and see it in context, and then see what people do when you're not around, what they say when you're not around, and the direction that they start to move for solutions or non-solutions or whatever it is while you're not there. Like say you skip a few meetings, or you step out and you take a back seat and you stop talking. It'll give you a much better idea of where the problems are and the root causes. And so I think when we talk about this being, whether you're in the military leadership or President Trump, being able to step back and see what people actually have to say about you when they think that you are no longer in charge, when they think that you're no longer a threat, when they think that you no longer really care or can affect them, it will give you a lot of clarity on not just the people, but a lot of other things. So there's the problems and there's the people, right, which may be synonymous. But the people, especially, people tend to tell the truth eventually, whether it's through their words or most likely their actions. And so I think President Trump stepped back. He was able to see, like, hey, I hired the wrong people. The people that are experts or totally beholden to the machine that is Washington, D.C., they didn't actually mean what they said. They're playing a different game than I'm playing, and that's something you need to learn too, as whether or not you're an airman right now or just starting out your corporate career, is not everybody's playing the same game you're playing. You go on Twitter or X or whatever, you go on social media and everybody's like, how come they're doing it this way? And everybody thinks that like the politicians and the media, their favorite influencers, all these people, everybody's playing the same game that you think that they're playing, and that's not always the case. And creating that space a lot of times will help you understand what game they're playing. Like, is that person that you hired last time actually on your side, or are they just a careerist, or do they have a lot of personal relationships with people that do not personally care for you, and therefore they're going to do everything in their power to quietly undermine your goals and your leadership? And it's going to be hard to see that if you don't create that space, because if you're there in the problem all the time, those people are constantly surrounding you, odds are, to your face, if you're the person in charge, they're never going to say anything. The people that are most likely to end up being on your side and helping you are the ones that are probably going to, in the meetings or whatever you're doing, say to your face like, hey man, I don't understand why we're doing this, which you're like, oh my god, like, and you see this in the military sometimes too. Like, I've been in these situations where I told a general like, hey, this idea is a bad idea, not because I had something personally against. I didn't have a personal problem. Well, okay, I might have ended up with a personal problem with that general at some point, but in that context of that moment, I did not have a personal problem with that general. I was looking at the problem, and I was looking at my, my experience in this area, and trying to relay to this person that the solutions that they had presented were not going to be a good deal, and I have this historical, albeit anecdotal data that proves that what they want to do is not going to be successful in the way that they claim that it's going to be successful. I think a lot of leaders sometimes will take that, especially weaker leaders, will take that as an affront to their authority. But the reality is those are the people that are actually working towards solutions a lot of times, especially if they present alternate solutions. So there's the people that complain. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the people that will sit down with you and to your face say, this is not the way, according to the way I see things, and this is what I think we need to be doing instead, and give you something else to think about. Those are the people that you need to surround yourself with, not the people that are going to sit there to your face and say, oh, yes, sir, like that, absolutely, like this is what we want to do, and then go behind your back and totally torpedo everything that you're trying to do. So Trump dealt with that for 4 years. 4 years after that, while he wasn't president, there was a lot of stuff going on in his life. But man, like, imagine having people on your staff that you trusted that for 4 years after that come out and accuse you of treason and all these other things. And whether or not any of this, I'm not trying to make a political statement about this. I think everybody knows where I stand politically, if you're listening to the podcast. But I'm just saying, everybody showed their true colors after that. Like, there's no reason to lie once the man is not sitting on the throne or whatever anymore. So it gave him a lot of clarity. I think he was surprised, and I think he got a much clearer picture of what the game actually is. And then once you understand the game and you understand the people and the machine a lot better, man, you can formulate an actual plan. So you can see the root causes a lot better. So this is one of those things too, where it's really easy for us to deal with everything on a very surface level, on a very short-term level, because I think emotionally that's what we want to do. Like you see this with like the all the arguments for any government intervention to take away something from us. Drugs are bad. The cartels are evil because drugs are bad and the cartels are evil, and therefore we need to get rid of drugs. I think that's a very short-term way of looking at things, because you're not taking into the long term, right? Same with like the gun control argument. Well, like, guns kill people, and when you say stuff like that, it's inherently dishonest because people kill people. It's easy to look at the small, the very shallow way of looking at things and being like, this is the problem. But that's not the problem. You got to dig a little bit deeper, and it's hard to see the root causes if you're there just slamming your face up against the front door of this problem and never getting to the back of the house and seeing where the actual problems are coming from. So gaining clarity through space, seeing the root causes. And then one of the other things that I think was really interesting that, President Trump did during his 4 years off of the presidency, when he took it back, went back to being a regular person, and I say that with in quotes, because he was definitely not a regular person during those 4 years. He went ahead and was like seeking out guidance from people that are wicked smart in a lot of ways that he is not, and they're not necessarily connected to the machine. From interested but removed people and parties. All right. So like you take like your Elon Musk, especially, obviously he's very interested in and I think he's become more interested through the years in the way the government is working or not working very well, in the way the personal liberties of people, the civil liberties and the freedom of the American people, he thinks is I think very important. Now, obviously, I don't agree with the guy on everything, but I think it was a very wise idea for President Trump to be like, hey, like, the people in Washington are not doing the things that they said that they were going to do. So he goes to this other guy and says, hey, man, like, what do you think we should do? Like, you're wicked smart. You run, or you're in charge of a whole bunch of companies. And if you look at companies and the government, like, hey, man, like, if we were going to run the government more like one of your companies, how would we do it? And I think Trump, coming from, his big thing is like, I'm a businessman, and him being able to he's not like, I know everything about business and the best way to do everything, and I can do everything myself. And he especially knows that from the experience he had the first time, reaching out to other people that are in the business world and being like, hey, I'm going to need your help and I want to value your perspective. And I'm still going to make, final decisions and and all that other stuff. But I'm going to give you a lot of freedom of movement to get out there and illuminate the problems. And I think they have that trust too, because obviously Elon Musk has proven that he can create highly successful companies that make a lot of money. And you can't do that with the amount of waste that the federal government has. So I think seeking out guidance and the opinions of people that are not in that problem, right? So like if you're like the squadron commander, excuse me, and you're in these meetings and things are not going well, or you're the chief or you're just a supervisor, man, step back. Talk to someone that's not in your organization. Get some clarity and some guidance. Like get the big picture. Get someone that doesn't have any real skin in the game right now. That is not part of the system that you're in, the organization that you're in. Then they're not working the same pots of money that you're working in, and just scratch their brain a little bit. See what's in there. See what the situations they've been in. It's probably not the exact same situations, but there's definitely going to be correlations between your situation and their situation. If you're not smart enough to learn from, situations that are, laterally positioned from your situation, then maybe you shouldn't be in charge of anything. But it'll help just broaden your understanding of what's actually happening, and that's why I think is super important. And I think that's what happened. So the next thing you need to do is make sure that you have principle or goal-based plans in place, right? So as President Trump moves in for a second term, I think he has big picture things that he wants to get after. But what you're seeing is him trusting his folks to get after those things, and he's not managing the specifics. So there's a lot of room for flexibility. There's a lot of room for planning on the fly to get these things done. And he's done some very specific things with the executive orders, but it seems like with the people that he's sending out there and the teams that he's using to do different things, I don't think he's got his thumb on them. He doesn't seem like that kind of manager. And I think with the clarity that he has now after spending 4 years away from it and coming in there and just wrecking shop now, whether you agree with it or not, he's been highly effective simply by gaining clarity, surrounding himself with the right people, having an overarching plan, and then trusting his people to go out there, at least bring him the data and probably the solution that he wants to get after anyway, so that he can just greenlight it and say, yes, here's the check mark, or start to strategize on ways to get things done. But they also did a lot of strategy before he was even elected. Otherwise, you talk about like the Doge and the organization that it was before it was Doge, and it was created by President Obama to help with a lot of the cyber stuff surrounding the Affordable Care Act. Excuse me. So they didn't come into this just flinging stuff at the wall. They had like the basis of a plan. They had a starting point. Like, this is what we're going to do. This is where we're trying to go. Everything in between. President Trump's like, hey man, I'm going to be doing this stuff over here. Come talk to me every once in a while. We'll do press conferences and all that other stuff and get after it. And I trust you because they built that relationship over the past 4 years. So if you're a squadron commander, getting that clarity, like stepping back, right? Like maybe look at your officers, your senior NCOs, or even your NCOs, and figure out who's actually trying to get where you're trying to go. Who's going to have that influence, and who's going to be able to execute the plan that you're trying to get after. And I think one of the traps that we fall into here in the military is because we view this hierarchy as a very solid, I don't know, like it seems very strict, right? Like if I'm a lieutenant colonel, how can I go talk to a staff sergeant and then empower them to do the things that I want them to do? Like that, they're so far down the chain of command and everybody needs to know. And I think there's a little bit of truth to that. I think more often than not, I would say if you're a squadron commander, maybe you shouldn't yell at a airman to their face, because you should go yell at their senior NCO, because that's the root cause, right? The root cause is typically not the airman. If they're messing everything up day to day, it's their supervisor and that person's supervisor, and then the DO, and then you, right? Like that's those are the people that are messing up. So like you'd have no reason to just yell at an airman specifically until it gets brought up the chain of command correctly. Anyway, but I know coming from where I came from on the special operations side, it wasn't that unusual to be like an E5 and have actual conversations with your squadron commander. Granted, we're pretty small. We're not a huge group of guys. Um, but if you're having a hard time getting things to go the way that you want them to go as a squadron commander, and the people, maybe your chief that you chose or what got assigned to you, and your first sergeant and your DO that got assigned, maybe they're just not on the same page as you. Maybe they're all looking at retirement and they're just checking out. And maybe you have a lot of goals and all this other stuff that you're trying to get after. Go find the people, go energize your base in political terms, right? Go find the people that want to do the same things you're doing, or go do the research with the folks lower down in the chain to understand why they might not be psyched to get after the things that you're getting after. So the education process, right? So like, it's easy to sit up in your office and think that you understand, but man, sometimes you got to go talk to your people and actually get unfiltered advice and feedback from them so that you can get after those things. And then you can roll that. Probably you might change your end goals just a little bit, but more than likely there's just variables that you're not tracking that you need to roll into your plan moving forward to energize the folks below you to get that accomplished. It's probably not them not understanding. This is most likely. It's not them not understanding where you're trying to go if you're the boss. More likely, I think it is that as the boss, you don't understand where they're at. And if you don't meet the people where they're at, how are you going to find the solutions if you don't even have the same starting place? And so I think that's where we run into problems often. So yeah, there we go. All right, and the last thing we really have in here is, I know we talked about it already, is trust your people and be prepared for mistakes. How do you deal with mistakes? If you believe everything you see on X and the social medias and the media outlet companies, there's been a lot of mistakes that have been made, in the first month of President Trump's second presidency. But watch how he handles it. There are definitely levels of mistakes where he's the guy that has no problem. If you make a mistake and you're not, and it's not a mistake, you just don't care, like your goal is to do the other thing versus what he wants you to do as the boss. If you're straight up insubordinate, he has no problem firing people. But if Elon Musk comes out and is like, hey, like we're paying, Medicare and Medicaid to, people that are 150 years old, and maybe he misread what as looked like a year and it's actually just a code for unknown, whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, so what is that little mistake? If that was a mistake, I didn't actually research that to see if that's true or not, but that's what they're saying. It's like, oh, like he's so dumb because he doesn't know that this term is just a code for something else in the government, the never-ending bureaucracy that is the federal government, and the stupid codes and all this other stuff that we use based on the 8 million different computer systems that we have all the way from the 70s to the 90s, and apparently that's when we stopped creating new systems for the government. Anyway, President Trump's not like, oh my gosh, this guy's so stupid, because it doesn't matter, right? Like the guy's trying to, it's a learning process. Problem solving is learning. That's why you see us like our community all the time. We talk about it a lot. Like, hey man, if I got the 80% solution, I'm moving out. And we're going to learn along the way. If we don't have the time or the intel to figure the rest of it out. That's why we train so hard, is so that we can be flexible. And so this idea that if people make mistakes, you need to overreact, if you need to go after them, it's not helpful, especially from the boss man perspective. So I think what we can learn from the second Trump presidency, to wrap this section up, is to gain some clarity, create some space between you and a problem. If you're sitting in a problem and it feels like you're in boiling water and you're surrounded by people that are not listening to you or not understanding, especially if you're in a leadership or a supervisory role or any of that other stuff, if you have the time to take some space and look at things from the big picture, do it. Absolutely do it. It will help you so much. Personally, having an ATC tour earlier on in my career, on the training side, right? The training command tour as a staff sergeant, and feeling like I was in boiling water the entire time I was there, because I just jumped in and, things have to happen right away. And so you take all the courses, you do all these things, and then towards the end, like maybe the second year, the last year and a half of that tour is when I finally had a little bit of bandwidth to actually think about what was happening and to figure out, real solutions and not just do things the way that everybody's always done things. It's hard. But then when I leave there and I'm able to see those folks that were trained and talk to them on team, and then to really be honest with myself about my performance as an instructor the first time around, and then to come back, I would think that my performance as an instructor the second time around was much, much better, because as soon as I got those orders, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what the root causes of a lot of the problems are in the training command. I understand. I have a better understanding of how to fix those problems and who I need to talk to fix, a myriad of problems that we might run into. And I think it was a lot more successful the second time around. I'm not saying I never made mistakes. The second time around, things weren't perfect, and there was still a ton of stuff to learn. But I had just enough space and perspective and clarity to come in and start making a difference in a positive way right away. And so that's all I'm saying. I like looking at the world around us and being like, man, like you look at the first presidency versus the second, and it's cool because it's such like recent history, and it's happening in real time right now. And so like look at the world around you and be like, what can we learn from what's happening right now? Like the human condition, human nature, how all these things operate. I think it's just a fascinating thing to look at. So my take is obviously not rocket surgery. I'm not out here breaking a lot of new ground. There's probably a million books out there that are like, step back, see the big picture, gain clarity, do all these other things. And it's good to read it, but to see it happening in real time, I think really just brings it home. And at least for me, because, reading is hard. I almost joined the Marine Corps, if that tells you anything. It's good. It's better to see it happen in real time and to see the effects of it real time and to see the pushback and how mad people get when you come in and you already know what you're going to do because you've gained that clarity, and then you just hit the ground running, and nothing else matters because you already know what you're doing, and you've surrounded yourself with better people this time. The only other thing I wanted to talk about today is something I've been seeing a lot of lately, and just it kind of rolls into training and all the things we've always talked about. Is people will be like, I need to know everything there is to know about the standards in the pipeline. I need to know everything I need to, that everything that I can know about all these different things. And I have to tell you that being told something and knowing something are two different things. Like just like everything else, right? There's levels to everything. I see a lot of people out there on the interwebs, that have been told stuff that think that they know it just because they've been told it, right? There are people that will be like, well, especially on the military, influence or whatever, social media side of things. Well, my buddy, who's a Navy SEAL sniper, breacher, blah, 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 said, and it's like, but that doesn't mean that you know that, bro. And the arrogance to think that like book learning is the same thing as actual learning, it is beyond me. I think most of these things without experience is pretty worthless. I mean, obviously, like you can learn a lot from books, and I'm a big reader. I like it, but if you never put anything into practice, then how do you know? And that's why when sometimes if we seem like we come off a little bit frustrated about certain questions that we get, it's because if you're not taking action, then it doesn't matter. You can think that you know about the pipeline, right? I can explain to you what it's like to low crawl with a ruck on your back through mud and rain and all this other stuff. But until you've experienced it, you don't really know what that means. I can lay out the selection course training plan for you, and I can go into great detail about what is expected and what all of these events are. And I can even try to explain to you what it feels like, right? It's the same way that my wife can sit me down and try to explain to me what it feels like to carry a child for, 10 months and then to have that child. And at the end of the day, I'm going to be like, it hurts. And then what's the closest thing I have? It's like getting kicked in the balls, you know, like, so like what would I have other than that? Maybe if appendicitis, whatever it is, right? Like, but that is assumingly so far from her actual experience. I will never understand what that is like. And I think when we talk about like the pipeline and some of the questions that we get, it's funny as you watch these people go through this process, the folks that have put in, the years and the months of training before they're about to ship have way fewer questions about everything. There's some very basic questions that everybody wants to know, right? But if you don't execute that basic knowledge and start moving forward, the rest of everything that we're going to tell you is not going to make sense. And so we live in this world where, the knowledge economy and all this other stuff, where we think that, being told something or reading something is knowing something. In the real world, in our world, if you don't do something about it, then it doesn't matter. Especially when it comes to like the pipeline. And so if you want that wisdom, like the experience and knowledge together, and all that other stuff, then you have to do it. People ask silly questions about, swimming and running and all this other stuff. And the first question back is what? Well, how far are you running every week right now? If you want to talk about running form or anything like that, like how much time have you spent getting to know your tendencies in this area? Or are you just gonna, like, with no effort on your part, are you gonna come to us and be like, I need a running program to get ready for Air Force Special Warfare? And it's like, well, how far are you running right now? And it's like, I'm not. Then get bent. Like, kick rocks all the way down the street for 2 miles and then come back. And then do that again for like 2 months. And then if you have data, right, on yourself being like, man, I'm running 4 miles 4 times a week and things are not getting better, then we can be like, oh, like maybe this is the type of person you are, and maybe you need to run more sprints, and then like you're putting in whatever, this many miles a week. You can do the same amount of miles and split it up into shorter, faster, and then your LSDs, right, your zone 2 type running and all that other stuff. But until you have that baseline data, until like I know that you're actually running, then who cares? And so I just think that's like a trap that people get trapped in on the internet too, is, I've been told this and therefore I know it. And it's such a dangerous thing to believe what people say, if you have no experience in that arena, right? That's like the high school kids talking about politics and economics. Do you take anything that they say seriously? No. Why? Because they don't have any experience. They don't have any real world experience. They don't have any life experience. And so it's funny to me that that's such an obvious thing. Like if my 7-year-old tried to tell me who to vote for, I'm not. It's cute, but it doesn't matter. The same way though, even when people get older, like there are 50-year-old people out there that are still have no real life experience that want to tell people about stuff. There are politicians that have no real life experience that want to spend your hard-earned tax dollars and billions and trillions of dollars in stupid stuff, and so that's a way to look at people too. It's like, oh, well, this person has all these degrees and they have all this experience, being a politician. And it's like, what does that mean? What does that mean? What kind of experience is that? And so not all experience is the same either. So understanding what they know versus, what it says on their resume are two very different things. And that will help you maybe understand where they're coming from, the game they're playing, or just how probably stupid and ignorant they actually are, because they're politicians and all that other stuff. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today. Appreciate y'all hopping on here. I haven't done a solo in a while. I would like to know, in the real world right now, is there anything that you're seeing that you're pulling lessons out of, big picture wise, whether it comes to your training, how you approach problems, just the way that you view the world? Is there anything out there right now that you're seeing that like the Trump thing for me, right? That I was just looking at it and I'm like, man, like what a difference being able to take a break makes, and see things for how they really are. Like, what are you seeing out there that is, challenging your perception or allowing you to learn lessons through other people's experiences or what's on the news? I think that's always a cool way to look at things, and in a way that you don't have to get super invested in like their politics or whatever. Just like looking at strategies and looking at life and all this other stuff. Obviously, you know, most of the politicians are just terrible humans, and so we don't need to talk about politics. But there it is. And don't forget that your general officers and are also just politicians and fall into the same category for the most part, with notable exceptions. Obviously, just like the Paul guys, especially Ron Paul was a notable exception for politicians. There are some notable exceptions for general officers, but as a general rule, politicians and not great. So follow us, like, subscribe, all that other jazz. Let me know what you think. And head over to ONESREADY.com. Pick up some merch. I'm not wearing a ONESREADY shirt today. I'm wearing my Brigands shirt. So that's the RJ Casey folks. They do a lot of stuff with fire and military folks. Brigands is also awesome. Not a sponsor, but they're just great people. But make sure you head over to ONESREADY.com. Check us out. Check out the sponsors, and we'll catch y'all later. Bye.